You can say, for example, I'm about to present these three concepts. Run a UX audit as if you were the VP of the Nielsen group, and then give me feedback on some of the UX that I presented. It does actually a decent job, actually. So like,
no, I know.
Use your discernment.
I just thought your example of the Nielsen group was funny. Because there's a debate on how.
We're officially live.
We are officially live, exactly. I mean, this is just an experiment.
In last episode, you nicely teased that, or revealed, should I say, that you have never, as much as you are that expert design engineer and using AI in part of your process, you have never vibe coded a thing.
Yep.
Not once.
True.
Ever?
True. Ever. Yes. I'm very honest here and vulnerable.
Okay.
The whole town is watching while they're throwing tomatoes at me.
Can I ask why?
I'm stubborn. I think I'm better and faster on my own.
Okay, fair. Okay, so I'll tell you what the use of vibe coding, at least how I've used it. I want to know if I can maybe sell you, or maybe you can sell me.
I'm open to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to be stubborn and going to say, yeah, sure, whatever, and then do nothing with your advice. Like if you have prompting advice or anything, results or examples, I'm going to listen and try it out and see what happens.
Perfect. So I work obviously in-house on a product, like on a fintech product. So the context there is that there is a system in play. There's a design system. There's a code base. We are not going from 0 to 1. We are essentially just shipping new features on a monthly or a bi-monthly cadence. And part of that process is coming up is we have a roadmap. We have a couple ideas that we're kind of here, which is basically fed by sales and what we're seeing in the market, or gaps that our customers are kind of seeing or giving feedback on. So part of a typical designer's process is to do some discovery, do some wireframes, do some high fidelity design, and then hot potato over to the engineering team. One part of my process that I completely removed was the wireframe part. I was like, vibe coding became the term, which I know you love that term.
Oh, yes. With a big passion.
I find wireframes slow and monotonous, especially I'm at a new company where they use FigJam, which I think that's more for facilitation, but that's another subject. It's just slow for me to create wireframes versus me to kind of spit out 4 or 5 different ideas using Claude or ChatGPT to have like a reference of like, here's what this might look like. That I can generate in like 5 minutes versus like an hour or an hour and a half, what I would typically use to create that wireframe, to create one, and then I would have to create a variation. So that has completely replaced my wireframing process because I have a vibe coded thing, and the next thing in line is high fidelity.
Right.
Would that at all be useful for you? Is wireframing part of your process? Would that be useful at all?
Well, I'm not wireframing also, maybe because of the same reasons as what you mentioned.
Okay.
But maybe before we go into that step, this episode mostly being about prompting, you say you can come up with a few ideas in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Like, what does that look like? Because there are so many different things to consider, like one-shotting versus multi-shots and plan mode. Like, there's so many keywords thrown around. And I imagine that's confusing for people who are aware that they need to do more AI stuff, just to call it, give it a silly name, AI stuff. But they do not really know where to start. What model should I use? What plan for the model? How can someone start their prompting adventure and get to your level of having 4 or 5 ideas in 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the prompt is the core of it, right? So the prompt is essentially what you're typing in and feeding to the LLM to kind of generate you a thing.
Yeah.
And as saying goes, slop in, slop out. The prompt that you're crafting has to be super detailed and has to have some of the context. So I don't think it's really matters which prompting or vibe coding tool you use. I think if you use ChatGPT or Claude probably the best for anything code related. If I find a suggestion, go with Claude. Just the output is better. And then how it does edits is a lot better too. Instead of rewriting the entire page, it isolates the code that needs to be updated, and then you get to your preview a bit faster. But I digress. What's really important, what I do is I give it all the information that I need. And that could be a PRD that your PM has written. It could be any of the research that you have written. It could be screenshots of the current application so that it has, and that I would say is the prompt. So it's like the business logic, how the app looks like, any research or context that it needs. And then that is kind of like the first layer of like, here's the context. And now you get into what you'd like to build. And what I like to do, yeah, go ahead.
So you're adding, it sounds like you're adding a lot of attachments. Like you're not just writing everything out. Like we are a fintech company. Like you have like documents, PDFs, transcripts, like all sorts of images you can just drag into the prompt field.
Exactly.
Do you hit send in any way? Or do you just make this one massive prompt and see what happens?
At a low level, here's what I do. I go, here's an attachment, wait for my next prompt. So I don't, and then it basically goes, okay, I'm ready. And then I go, here's another attachment, wait for my next prompt. And I'll keep doing it until I think it has all the context needed to execute on what my final direction might be. So it's like, maybe I would segment it into two parts: context up front, and then what I'd like to do in the next. Quick tip for me, or a thing that I like to use voice to text. So whether that's using ChatGPT's audio feature or Whisperflow. Whisperflow just essentially allows you to kind of speak to your computer, and then it goes voice to text.
I think it's great, Whisperflow. I have it looking at its logo in my Mac taskbar right now. It's on my
super
machine
useful.
too.
Like you talk faster than you type. This is essentially what you need. And then even if you're doing and ums, it doesn't matter. It understands.
Yeah, true. It's very interesting. What I noticed within my own workflow is that I use it for prompting, where formatting doesn't really matter. But I'm not using it for a WhatsApp message or an email, because it's trying, but in my experience, it's not really formatting the way I want it to, or how I would format myself with lists and paragraphs and line breaks. Then I end up frustrated and redoing my email anyway. So for prompting, yes. Small copy changes in Figma, also yes, but not for large text, personally.
Yeah, I think you can. Whisperflow specifically, you can add some settings where you basically, if you talk and say, I want bullet points for these 3 lines, it'll do it for you. I haven't gotten there, but that's how it was sold to me. So apparently you can.
It's a Nick skill issue, perhaps, or me being too stubborn in how I want to format a nicely written, important email to a client. But I use it a lot for prompting and more like behind closed door text, a Figma change or a prompt or something that isn't client facing. Anyway, back to prompting. So context, and then what was step 2 again?
The context
goal and the thing you want to do.
Yeah, so I think context number 1, and that can just be you dumping files or copying, pasting things. You can get more complex in terms of like, you can actually connect ChatGPT to your Confluence or Notion space. So it already has that without actually pasting it in. So like off the rip, it has all the context that's needed. And then you can just kind of prompt. But essentially being as detailed as possible. So instead of saying, build me a login feature, your prompt might be, build me a login feature for fintech clients that is flexible enough to enable SSO, logging in with social media, Google Gmail account, Gmail, etc. Make sure they include the failure states, etc., etc. Like the more detail you get, the more accurate the result will be.
Yeah, that makes sense, because we have all the context in our brain. Like we've been with a client or with a company for a year or maybe more. in all those meetings, the briefings, and you thinking about work while commuting or walking your dog or whatever, that's all in your brain. But a new chat window where you are going to put in a prompt, it starts from scratch. It's sure it has memory to today, and you can have projects and skills and all that stuff. But it's it has an improved starting point, but mostly it's like you're talking to someone who's never heard of your situation before.
Exactly. And then the benefit is that actually my ChatGPT is essentially is a brain dump of me because it has the memory feature. So essentially I use specific logins for the different types of work that I do. So it knows I work on these types of projects. So it already has vaguely some of that context as well.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a core memory feature or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very useful. I had a new chat recently talking about some topic, brainstorming and asking a few questions. And then at some point I got a reply just like in this and this and this scenario where you already did such and so. Oh yeah, that's true. It remembers. And I think that's very useful. It came up with things I already had forgotten. But so far we are prompting in the same way, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to keep in mind, I think, related to what you're saying, for anyone who's going to try this out, is that in my experience, any LLM, it really wants to get to a solution. Even if you do not ask for it, it's going to do the thing. If you're talking about a prototype and you feel like you're just, brainstorming and discussing, it's already making changes while you're no, I'm still figuring this out. So like a kindergarten teacher, sometimes it's what it feels like. The first prompt, I'm going to be well, do not make any changes yet. Let's brainstorm, and then it goes into this mode of, not an official mode, but, it's going into a mindset of asking questions back before going into solution. So you really have to put up the guardrails.
Yes. Yeah. It does want to get to spit out something. So yeah, that's why, I mentioned earlier, I'm wait for my next prompt, or let's talk about this first before touching any code is super important, or else you're just going to be waiting until it finishes its task or what it thought the task was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's annoying. Okay, so at some point it has its context, it knows what you want, and then you're going to ask it to, do you give it a number? Create 5 ideas here, or is it more open-ended? How does that work for you?
There's different ways you can do it. So you can get all the way till it has the context, and then from there you say, okay, create me a solution. And then what I can do is open up a separate tab and then take that solution, paste in the code, whether it's in Claude, say, taking this as a reference, create me another variation that has this kind of experience. And then it'll generate something. And I'll do it. I'll open up several different tabs with different solutions, and I'll compare whether that's just myself, or I'll grab another designer, or I'll book a meeting and then show it with the engineering and product team. Here are a couple of different ideas. What do we think? What are the pros and cons of each? And then we have a thing we can reference, versus creating a wireframe, which would take a bunch of time. I can basically show a thing, get quick validation, and then so I can get to my next step, which is the Figma high fidelity step.
Yeah. So zooming out, looking at the steps, it's, regardless of the way to get there, there's a challenge. Something doesn't work on the product, or you have this great new idea, there's something you want to build on top of the product, but you're not really sure yet how, what it should look like. So you're in the going wide phase, you're thinking about a bunch of ideas. Feedback is required to see if it's possible from a dev standpoint, or if you even want it to go this way from a stakeholder standpoint. You have 5 ideas, for example, one has potential. You take that one idea, you're going to go into high fidelity mode, Figma mode. You're going to create the edge cases, mobile, desktop, etc. So vibe coding and prompting is just a way to get the first batch of ideas ready for someone to review.
Exactly. And like
Yeah.
there's some additional layers that you can do before you present it to your design collaborators or the engineering team. You can say, for example, I'm about to present these three concepts. Run a UX audit as if you were the VP of the Nielsen group, and then give me feedback on some of the UX that I presented. It does
Yeah.
actually a decent job, actually. So like
Yeah. No,
you have
I
to
know.
use your
I just
discernment.
thought your example of the Nielsen group was funny. You know, because there's a debate on how how relevant they are today.
True.
Yeah, but that's beside the point. I'm curious about that output. Like, do you okay, you have all those tabs, you have 5 or ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you do a little validation run on your own. Like you and your designer eye, your design experience and knowledge, you're
Yeah.
going to look at those ideas individually. Like, does this even make sense? Yes or no?
Yeah, exactly. So that I'll
Yeah.
like I'm not presenting 5 ideas. I might present 2
Right.
just to reduce that cognitive load there from like the
Mhm.
presentees.
Yeah.
And then I'll have my 2 that I'll present, and I'm taking the AI's feedback with a grain of salt. Like at the end, like I'm the one doing the decisions,
Mm.
but I'm leaning on it for a bit of that feedback.
And so, okay, so let's say you have 5 ideas, 2 of them have potential in
Mhm.
your designer's eye. Are they like, is there anything in between that tab and how you present it? And if there's anything in between that you still have to do, is that then a follow-up prompt, or like what are the steps to go from that first generated thing to here's what it looks like, Mr. Stakeholder?
Yeah, so like caveat there, when I'm vibe coding a thing, it is not just a screen. I'm
Mm.
generally creating a flow. So it's not just here's what this new setting panel looks like. It's here's the feature and it has these different steps. So the
Yeah.
benefit of kind of vibe coding or prompting my way to the solution is that I'm testing out the flow as I kind of click through, and then testing out if I'm with those 2 options, I'm kind of clicking through and seeing how they both kind of feel. So I have a better sense of how it would kind of click through versus like wireframing or doing a Figma prototype, which is limited and it doesn't actually follow logic. The vibe coded thing, you can add a database to it with Supabase. You can add some of those logic pieces. It has more of that feel. But next step would be I can create a slide deck, but I'm basically just presenting and running a mini usability study with my internal team and just asking questions.
Right.
Hey, what do we think about these 2 things? I can actually share, if it's Claude Code, the artifact with my team and having them kind of play with it async if they need to.
Yeah.
Not everything has to get done in that 30 or an hour and that hour meeting. So they get a feel for it too. The engineering team can see like, oh, this actually we can do something with this because our code base has this infrastructure. We can actually do something. And here's what I would tweak to make it to reduce the scope so we can quickly get it out the door.
Yeah. All right. So I really, listening to you, the Supabase, database connection really stood out to me. So it's not just prompting, like there's a bit of a setup required if you're going to do this professionally.
Yes.
Because I imagine that flow, like when you say a database, that means that it probably has some sort of, a login authentication type thing, or managing files or anything that's not only a shiny front end. So it's more than just making a Claude or ChatGPT account. You need a bit of more of a setup.
Yeah. You don't necessarily have to have it, but like if you're in the ideal state, if you're actually presenting that vibe coded thing or that prompted output to a client, it is super important that the data that is being visualized is realistic. So curating that backend piece or that data that it's pulling from, it's good for it to be realistic, especially if you're, especially for me in my industry in fintech, like if you're presenting to advisors, the graphs and the output of the analytic charts need to be like super realistic or else it stops the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Otherwise you have a discussion about, well, this is not how it would work in real life. Like that data point there, the graph, that's way too much. And then you're like, yeah, but it's not important. But then they are still stuck on that little thing. So yeah, that's a battle tested piece of advice from
Definitely.
2 senior designers. Prompting wise, I think another bit of advice to share is that it's okay to start over. I'm not sure if that's something you encounter as well, but for me, sometimes I just I'm going in circles. This incredibly smart AI helper tool turns out to be super dumb at times. Completely stuck and forgetting things, and your prototype is broken, and it's okay to click the little orange plus or the ChatGPT plus or whatever just to start new. That's something I wanted to say. Like sometimes it's just attempt failed, let's start new. That's better than going into circles, a few more rounds.
Yeah, I think the benefit there, the additional benefit, along with to kind of jump off what your point is, it's just a piece of thing that's temporary. Like I get into this debate with my design team, like we have Figma Make, which does the same thing as like ChatGPT or Claude, but I like using Claude or ChatGPT because it's like I consider it as like temporary. It's not an artifact that I want to store anywhere. It's just it's part of my process to get my ideas out, and I'm okay with never seeing it again. I just want to see it now, so I have a reference of if my idea makes sense, so I can push forward to the next stage.
Right. So it's really a helper tool for you. It's not something to wrap as a present, like, hello, product manager, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yes, exactly.
It's just a little artifact, like just something that helps the discussion move forward. Because it's just easier to look at something, to be able to click through something compared to thoughts and discussion, where it's just text and sound.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What I, thinking back about your prompting structure, I start with context too, but I do mention in the beginning my goal right away.
Yeah.
Like I'm working on this onboarding flow. That's always my first sentence. I'm working on, fill in the blank. And then there's usually, a whole bunch of context as well. Like I think that there's no discussion there. If you talk about what the best way is to prompt, if you're a designer or anyone else, like the goal plus context, like that's always the starting point.
100%. Yeah. Because that's also how like designers and like how you think also, like when we're creating a feature or coming with a solution, like what is the goal? And then that drives everything else afterwards.
Yeah. Sometimes I, like when I'm not really sure yet myself, like when I'm really early stage, I come up with goal, context, my idea optional in that stage if I have one. And then I ask it to ask me questions to validate, let it be the expert.
That's a good idea. Yeah. To challenge yourself, having like almost like an accountability partner kind of thing.
Yeah. And that not in a therapy way, like they know everything and they have to get it out of me, but getting a question back also helps me think, wait a minute, I didn't think about this. Well, that changes my view. And then I'm going to interrupt him or it or whatever.
Yes.
You say like, wait a minute, I have this new insight. Here it is. Continue with the questions. But you have to be specific because sometimes you're stuck an hour just answering like dozens of questions. So it's always good just transitioning into another piece of advice to be specific in the amount you expect. I want a 1 paragraph answer. I want 3 questions. I need 5 ideas, etc. It's like talking to a 3-year-old. It's you have to be really specific about the what and the when.
Yeah, 100%. Like, or else it's gonna hallucinate in the worst way, which I hate.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't ask for that, but it's also not a mind reader.
True. I mean, that's the thing. Like you and I, when we're talking, like our human brains together, like we can not in the literal sense, we cannot read each other's minds, but you can have this gut feeling of where a conversation is going, and then you can anticipate that. Like that's not the case with your LLM chats. So when you get unexpected results, you really have to be critical of yourself. Like, did I mention all the guidelines and scope and ideas and like anything that it needed? because if the answer is, well, I assume it just gets it, like a good boy, like that's a mistake. Yeah, you have to be really specific. Fun thing happened to me recently is that I asked Claude to help me with a game, just a PlayStation game. And I assumed that it knew about the game. So I started writing big prompt. I click send and I got a reply like, well, it doesn't look like that game exists, but it does because I was looking at it on my TV at that moment. And then my next prompt was, just 2 words, search online. And then it goes and search online. And then the happiness in the response was so funny, but also so silly at the same time. I got capital letters, bold, font weight, good news, exclamation point. There is a game. And I'm like, yeah, silly. I'm looking at it. But that, I mean, that's funny in a way, but still, it's an example of, just assuming that it knows what you're talking about. You either have to put in search online right away or flip that switch in Claude. It's usually a case of just having to be more specific. Again, like you're talking to a 3-year-old.
It's always just like, here's the thing. No, that's not what I meant. It's this little game until you're super precise.
Yeah, exactly. We have the prompting part of this episode, but then we also have me listening to you about, should you vibe code and all that stuff. Like I'm more convinced now, also because of the Figma MCP and Claude 2-directional update from last week. I tried it out, assuming that it would be a good way to do, production level code work on the actual code base. And then I got angry because it didn't take over variables and components. But listening to you now, I think it makes more sense if you have your local server, like you say, you share your prompt, your context, the goal, the idea. And then now you can say, okay, bring all of this into Figma. I think that's a good time saver. So I see that whole vibe coding, early stage exploration phase of a project. I see it, the AI way of doing it. I see it mature because of features like that. Like it's getting more real, more professional, more streamlined. And I think that's important for me. Like it has to be reliable, professional, and useful from start to finish. And I think it's really getting there. At the same time, like I don't really think stakeholders care where it came from. They just want to have those 5 ideas or those 2 ideas, you say. They want to be able to look at it and think about it and have a discussion. As long as you are on time and have a good quality stuff, like, can be vibe coded, can be hand drawn, who cares? Can be a paper prototype, like a 12 maniac, It's, I have a few more thoughts, but I'm going to stop rambling now.
That's true. I don't think anyone really cares what activities we do before something gets shipped, as long as it's thoughtful and we're doing it the right way. What tools we use to get to production, I think is irrelevant from the leadership standpoint.
Yeah. And
then back to like your kind of Claude and the kind of prompting ideas, I think I might want to tease our next episode with a story of how our team actually used MCP to implement our design system in a day. I'll leave us on that cliffhanger for next episode.
Well, I cannot wait. Because I really think the design system connection to vibe coding and prototyping with AI is going to be really useful. Because what you just said, like if a stakeholder looks at something and it's not realistic, they're gonna get stuck on that.
Yeah.
And it's not only the words and the numbers that you put in, but also like, does this feel familiar? Does it have more or less the branding or the components of what I'm currently using every day? So curious to hear more about that in the next episode. I hope I can sleep this night because of the excitement.
Hold your breath.
Yeah. All right.
That was a great episode. So if you like this content and want to hear more, please like and subscribe.
Yeah. And if you want to see more, please go to designtablepodcast.com, Spotify, Apple Music, all the big players and more.